Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Holly Pritchard, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Guri Singh. Today marks the 61st anniversary of the worst peacetime disaster in the Royal Australian Navy's history, the loss of HMAS Voyager after a collision with HMAS Melbourne. HMAS Voyager, a daring-class destroyer, sailed from Sydney to Jervis Bay on the 6th of February 1964 to conduct post-refit trials and exercises with HMAS Melbourne, a Majestic-class aircraft carrier. On the evening of the 10th of February, Melbourne was conducting night flying exercises with Voyager acting as a plane guard escort. The night was moonless, but visibility was clear. At 8:56 p.m, the ships collided and Voyager was sliced in two. The forward section passed down Melbourne's port side, sinking shortly after. The after section passed down the starboard side and sank some 3 hours later. Melbourne's crew recovered many survivors from the water and Voyager's after section. 2 RAN search and rescue boats sent from HMAS Creswell rescued 70 sailors. RAN helicopters and minesweepers also searched for survivors. Of the 314 men aboard HMAS Voyager, 82 died. 14 officers, including the commanding officer, 67 sailors, and 1 civilian dock worker. 232 sailors were rescued. This evening, we warmly welcome Group Captain Alan George, retired, representing the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of St Margaret's Primary School visiting from Maribyrnong, Victoria. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Students and visitors who are able to do so may now be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Warrant Officer Hubert George Carlyle, who was killed during the Second World War. Hubert Carlyle, known as Hugh, was born on the 30th of June 1913 in Wadebridge, England, to his Leslie and Amy Carlyle. He had a sister, Mary, and 4 brothers, Wilfred, Stuart, Morton, and Clifford. Carlyle attended primary school in London until 1926, when the family followed his brother Morton out to Australia. They settled in Adelaide, and Carlyle went to Adelaide High School and Adelaide University, where he studied teaching. He then worked as a school teacher in Tarcoola, South Australia. In 1938, Hugh's brother Clifford, who had served with the Royal Air Force in the First World War, died at the age of 37. In June the following year, his brother Morton was killed in an accident at his workplace. Carlyle moved to Black Hill in 1939 after being made head teacher at the school there. On the 16th of August 1941, Carlyle enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force at the age of 28. He trained as a navigator, and in May 1942, he received his Air Observer's Badge and was made a sergeant. A year later, he was promoted to flight sergeant. Carlyle embarked from Brisbane for overseas service on the 5th of May 1943, arriving in the UK in July. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, air gunners, and flight engineers who joined Australian and British squadrons in Britain throughout the course of the war. After further specialist training, in May 1944, Carlyle was promoted to warrant officer and posted to number 463 Squadron, RAF. As part of the Bomber Command, the squadron flew 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bombers. He became engaged to Marion Mallet, an aircraft woman serving in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. Carlyle's first combat mission was a bombing raid on Duisburg in Germany. He had mixed feelings about the success of the mission. He wrote in his diary, "It seemed much a casual business to us up above, but I could not help thinking with profound sorrow what anguish we may have caused down below." On the night of the 24th of June, 1944, Bomber Command launched a major raid on a flying bomb site at Prouville in France. Carlyle was a navigator on board the Lancaster J for Jig, which took off from the Royal Air Force Base at Wellington at about 10:45 p.m. The squadron committed 18 aircraft to the mission, but 3 failed to return. One of them was Carlyle's Lancaster. It was later discovered that the aircraft was attacked by a German fighter aircraft, causing an explosion. British flying officer Arthur Siddle was thrown clear of the aircraft and managed to parachute safely, but later became a prisoner of war. The rest of the crew were not so lucky. The plane's debris was later found 10 kilometers east of the target. Killed along with Warrant Officer Hubert Carlyle were Australians, Pilot Officer Geoffrey Tilbrook, Warrant Officer Alexis Menif, Flight Sergeant Maxwell Lack, as well as British Sergeants David Dow and Charles Penn. After the war, the remains of Commonwealth servicemen buried in Europe were examined and identified where possible. Investigations located the remains of Warrant Officer Carlyle at the St. Pierre Cemetery in Amiens, and he was reinterred thereafter under the inscription, "Only those who knew him knew the sacrifice he made." Hugh Carlyle was 30 years old. He was deeply mourned by his family, his fiancée, his friends, all of whom placed in memoriam notices in the newspapers for years after his death. One inserted by his mother read, "The sorrows and the happiness, gay June and gray December. The music fades, but the heart remembers." His brother Stuart Carlyle served in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force during the Second World War, and he returned home safely. Wilfred Carlyle named his son Hugh for his late brother. The younger Hugh Carlyle later died serving in the Vietnam War. Warrant Officer Hubert Carlyle's name is listed on the Roll of Honor on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Warrant Officer Hubert George Carlyle, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff, and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.